The GPS DairyCAST features the high-value insights of the GPS Dairy Consulting team's trusted advisors and the owners and managers from the elite dairy farms they serve. These conversations deliver on the GPS Dairy Consulting promise to inspire change and grow leaders.
Welcome to the GPS DairyCAST. I'm Peggy Coffeen from the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, serving as your host. And on this timely episode today, we welcome GPS consultant Jordan Hunt, as well as Todd Vogel from John Deere Equipment Dealership, Riesterer Schnell, to help you get started on planning for the upcoming corn silage harvesting season. And Jordan and Todd, welcome to the GPS DairyCAST.
Hi, Peggy.
Hi, Peggy. How's it going?
Great. So glad to have you guys here today. And this is the perfect time of the year to really start the preparation process for a winning season of harvesting corn silage, which is just around the corner. So why don't you just take a quick moment and introduce yourselves. Tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, where you're located, and what your area of specialty is. Todd, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'm Todd Vogel with Riesterer Schnell. I specialize in the forage harvesters for our dealership. We cover about 2/3 of the state of Wisconsin and the UP. Myself, I travel to a lot of the dairy trade shows over the winter, and we stay very in tune with the industry and what the experts are looking for in feed quality and the latest trends that are out there. And then I've been with the dealership for 16 years and really spend a focus of working with our customers and nutritionists and in their bunks and on the feed pads, making sure we're putting up the feed they're looking for.
Yeah, so this is your wheelhouse 100% when we talk about preparing for a successful corn silage harvest season. And Jordan, I'm going to flip over to you. Take a minute, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you do it from.
I'm Jordan Hunt with GPS Dairy Consulting. I'm a nutrition and management consultant working in eastern Iowa. I get up into southeast Minnesota as well as across the river into southwest Wisconsin, working with clients of all sizes in that geography. My main area obviously is nutrition and cows, but to really get the performance that we need, it does all come back to forage quality, and so I do spend a lot of time with my clients in this area to make sure we're doing everything we can to give us the best chance for performance and of course profitability for their bottom line.
And Jordan, when you talk about working with your clients to achieve that level of success, what often happens is you end up dealing with the results of maybe something that didn't go well during the harvest season, but it may not show up for months. And that's what you face as a nutritionist when you're helping your clients achieve their top performance, but also working with what is in the bag or what is in the bunker. So just take a moment, if you would, and tell us a little bit about some of the things that you run into, some of the problems that may show up later on in the year, months after harvest time, that could be prevented on the front end. What do you see in your role?
Every year is different, right? Depending on what challenges we're facing. But I do always try to remind the farms that we want to control what we can control. And within that, when it comes to the harvest process, number one, it's about timing of that plant and being out there when you're supposed to be and getting the optimal stage. But we also want to make sure we're cutting it at the right length, getting it at the right moisture. For corn silage specifically, having the grain fill so that there's optimal starch levels in that silage. And depending on the situation, like this year could be a case because of how wet it's been that we have muddier field conditions, potentially harvest gets delayed a little bit, or we're under these really tight windows and all of a sudden we're running the chopper a little faster than we should be, open up the processor, and when we go to feed it, processing scores are not where we want them. I have seen that in the past, and it is kind of the nature of the beast that comes about from time to time. And then another common one that does happen, once again, under time crunches, is might not sharpen the knives as often as you should be, and you get more of a kind of a shaggy fodder look to that silage, and doesn't feed as well.
Yeah. So what you just expressed, Jordan, is what you see on the output side, sometimes months later after corn silage is harvested. But these are things that, with a little extra preparation, can possibly be prevented on the front end. And enter Todd and your experience with helping producers and working with nutritionists to prepare their equipment and to do some troubleshooting so that months later, Jordan has an easier job, and dairy producers are having happier cows and a happier day of not having to deal with problems. Todd, I want you to just take a moment and talk a little bit about what dairy producers can be doing right now as they gear up for harvest season. What should we be looking at first when it comes to number one, and that's preparing harvesting equipment for top quality corn silage?
The three main pieces for that are going to be affecting the feed quality from the forage harvester is going to be our knives, shear bar, and the kernel processor on there for corn silage. Hopefully the kernel processors came in for winter service several months ago. We do definitely push that as soon as you're done with corn silage season, we like to see that kernel processor removed from the harvester. And then they do have winterizations to them of cleaning them up and oiling the rolls. And we oil the rolls on there so that they don't rust. The chrome rolls, if they rust at all, they can pit, which means those pieces where the rust is can start chipping away on the rolls. And then those KP rolls won't be as effective as they should be without that there. So coming into the season now, you'd be looking at the kernel processor and examining it to make sure that the teeth on the rolls are good and solid. We don't have that rusting going on, and that we feel there's a good amount of life on it to make it through the whole season. If it's questionable going into a season if those rolls are going to have enough life on them or not, we encourage our guys. We're really, we want to make feed quality, and that's the number one goal is high feed quality. So if the rolls are questionable, we want those replaced. And then same thing with the knives, making sure we got a good set of knives going into the corn silage season. We'll definitely promote corn knives. All machines have their standard knives. Grass knives are a grass and corn knife combo, but there are also corn knives available, and corn knives will help reassure that we're getting very consistent feed quality. In ideal conditions out there, the grass knives are going to do just fine. This could be a year as you drive by. There's some fields that look good and consistent out there, and then there's other cornfields that have a lot of variability to them. And I would say those fields make me a little nervous on that, because are we going to have some parts of the field that's going to be 70% moisture and others are going to be at 60% moisture as we're harvesting that field? It's going to be a challenging year for the variability in the field. And due to that, I guess I would be a person that would be pushing corn knives just so that we can try and create that consistency in our particle length with the variability out in the field. And like I say, grass knives in consistent conditions, we can make grass knives give us consistent results. But with the variability in the corn this year, you might see some variability in the length of cut due to the variances in the field, and corn knives can help with that. And then a nice square shear bar going into silage to again help reassure that we're getting that nice consistent particle sizing. And between the knives and the shear bar, that's going to affect what Jordan said about seeing some of that raggedy feed in there or some of those longer pieces. Having the right knives and a good shear bar is what's going to give us that nice square particle sizing.
Hey, Todd, for someone that might not know if they have grass or corn knives in, how can they differentiate what they currently have in?
Grass knives work for both grass and corn. The corn knives, the way they are, they tend to be more brittle And if you ran corn knives and hay, most of them are going to get destroyed just from having more ash and potentially little pieces of gravel and stuff going through like that. So the corn knives do not hold up in the hay conditions as well. So most machines are equipped with hay knives out there. And then again, really, if they've got good mechanics on the farm that they feel are adequate with that, making sure those guys are going through that and checking out their knives on there, or else working with their dealer out there to ask them their thoughts on the knives, if they think what they have is going to last, or what type of knife do they have, and if corn knives are available.
Are there any kind of key parts for either the chopper itself or the corn head that you feel guys should have on their shelves in the shop? Maybe common things that are more likely to be needed during harvest?
There are some. Having a couple extra knives for the cutter head available helps that. On the corn head itself, it would be the knives on the drums for the corn heads. Having a couple of those, typically you're cutting higher than where rocks are in the field for corn silage, but if you were to hit something there, it's mostly going to be the knife that's going to get damaged. So having the knives on hand for the corn heads as well. And then that is also part of it on the corn head before the season, making sure those knives are good and have good life left. Because as we talk about consistent particle size coming out of the machine, it's definitely going to start with the head feeding that machine smooth. If the head's not feeding well and it's kind of slugging into the machine, you may not have as consistent particle sizing as you would with a nice smooth crop flow coming through it.
And I hope this isn't the case, but we did have another derecho in our area here recently, and some crop damage. So if a farm is faced in a down corn situation, is there anything they need to think about doing differently to that cutter head to help pull in some down corn or even just leaning corn?
It'd be more so on the corn head itself, the gathering points in front of the corn head, like in front of the drum. If the corn is severely down, we can take those gathering points off to allow more area for the drum to get to, and then more area for that down crop to kind of get up onto the drum. That is one scenario to try there. Adjusting the speed of the head in those cases, like in most conditions, we don't have to mess with header speeds very often. But as we get into that large crop, then we might have to play with the header speed a little bit to try and get that feeding smoother. You may have to look at chopping at a different angle than what you're used to. You might have to go against the grain or do it at a 45-degree angle from the way it was planted to potentially harvest it cleaner and have it feed smooth in those conditions.
Good insights. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah. The down corn can definitely be a struggle in spots. So we always ask, like with our customers, if you're in a struggling condition like that, please reach out and we're going to do our best to help you through it and help throw some ideas and adjustments at it to see what we can do to make it feed smoother.
Save the date for the 2024 GPS Dairy Leaders Forum, happening this December 3rd through 5th, 2024 at the Mystic Lake Hotel and Casino in Prior Lake, Minnesota. Held after a busy fall of harvest and fieldwork, the Leaders Forum brings together some of the best and brightest leaders in the dairy industry. Over 20 world-class speakers, interactive breakout sessions, and keynote speakers provide a dynamic learning experience and renewed excitement to network and connect with other innovative and successful dairy producers from multiple states and regions. Mark your calendars for 2 days of forward-thinking, vision, innovation, and looking to the future. The 2024 GPS Dairy Leaders Forum this December 3rd through 5th, 2024. Talk to a GPS consultant to learn more or visit gpsdairy.com. So, Todd, as I hear you and Jordan both talking specifically about this harvest season that's just around the corner, it sounds like one of the keys is really not just in preparation, but being prepared for a lot of variability out there. And that's what it comes back to, being ahead of the game and having equipment prepared, having those extra parts on the shelf, like Jordan was alluding to, and also making sure that you can tune in or that you can ask someone else the questions if you need some help in figuring out how do we tackle this specific challenge in a field that's a little irregular or inconsistent, so that you can end up with as consistent of an end product as you can when it's all said and done and packed away. Do we want to spend a little time, Jordan, talking about kernel processing, go in more detail on that?
Yeah, I think that would be really well worth our time with being such a critical aspect of our corn silage harvest. Todd, it's something that we really try to get aligned with our dairies on who the captain on the farm is, on checking kernel processing, reporting it back. Sometimes it doesn't seem as easy as it should be for addressing maybe poor kernel processing. So I guess just kind of start big picture. I mean, when you're going at, addressing kernel processing on the chopper, what are some of your kind of first few areas that you're going to check with the operator on?
It'd be more so seeing what kind of rolls are in the processor. There are different rolls and differentials that are out there that can enhance kernel processing. So it's trying to find out what vintage of machine you're dealing with and what type of processing rolls and differential is on there for the pulleys. And more so meaning how fast is one roll turning versus the other one. It'd be like the processors out there that are set up for X-cut, or I mean, a lot of times you hear shredlage, but to me, it's just kind of like a broad name for that. But a lot of those processors are going to have a 50% differential on. That's pretty much the main processor that we deal with, is the ones that have the spiral cut rolls and the 50% differential. But then through our era of forage harvesters, we still are supporting a lot of machines out there that have a 21% differential with the straight sawtooth rolls. So it is knowing what type of processor you're dealing with as far as rolls and the differential on there, and then knowing where you can go from there. But the processors that are set up with the high differentials and the spiral cut rolls, we can pretty much make any type of processing score that you're looking for with those, as long as the rolls and the KP are maintained properly.
We've seen it become maybe more challenging as we've wanted more milk line. We want to be 50% plus milk line now. So yeah, I mean, a lot harder kernels than even 7-8 years ago, when guys would start at a third or a quarter milk line and have softer kernels that would bust apart easier. So it's just another aspect that we need to keep in mind. The end benefit is we're going to get more starch in that silage. We just got to make sure we're getting it broke apart.
Most machines and most processors should be capable of that, especially, any of the stuff in, the last decade. Most of all the machines in the last decade have KPs that are capable of the spiral cut rolls and higher differentials on there. And then to what you said, you're going to go out your first day, and usually the nutritionist might stop by, or maybe they're on the first day, or the farm's looking for the nutritionist to come verify that they're putting up the feed they are. The key there is that somebody is checking that feed every half hour to hour as it's coming in, or even more periodically if capable. But the size of these machines and the capacities of them have increased so much over the last several years that we were able to put a lot of tons of feed away in a fast period of time. And it is still all mechanical hardware that's doing this for us, and you can have failures with that stuff that sometimes you don't always necessarily feel it in the machine, because they are such high capacity machines that if something on the processor would let loose a little bit, sometimes the operators don't notice that, but something can loosen up to where basically one side of the rolls could be open a little more than the other. And then with that, you can start passing whole kernels through and stuff. And if we're not watching that feed regularly, you can put a lot of that up in a hurry like that. So it's definitely key that that first day when you get your machine set and everybody's happy with it, that basically somebody is continuously monitoring that feed throughout the whole harvest to make sure that all the feed coming in looks like what everyone agreed upon that first day for what they want. And again, not only just, processing, but what's the particle sizing coming in? Is there all of a sudden long raggedy stuff coming in? Do we have a knife adjustment that needs to be made, or do we just need to sharpen knives and reset the shear bar? So it's monitoring not only the processing of the kernels coming in, but also that cut quality and the consistency of that product coming in. You're looking for those nice square edges. It's like if you start seeing a bunch of raggedy feed coming in, we know we better be checking something and making adjustments with it.
Never let your guard down. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when it is true, because we do have a little bit of a tendency of, like I said, we got it set, we're feeling good, and then you're full hog, and all of a sudden things might not be looking exactly the way you want, and you can't be afraid to call a timeout. And it's not a fun thing to do when you're in the hustle and bustle of harvest, but it's the right thing to do to ensure that you get the right quality feed put up.
Yeah, and you're so right on that, Jordan. I was gonna just add, to what Jordan was saying there. It's when the feed's coming in, and if it's going good, nobody ever wants to stop or anything, but you're putting that feed up for the next 12 months or sometimes even a longer period of time. So you want to make sure that that pile of feed that is going up is the feed quality that you want. Otherwise, you're going to be jeopardizing the milk production at some point, and the milk production is going to far outweigh stopping and taking a little bit of time to make these adjustments, or kind of work together to figure out what we can do to make that feed better.
Well, Todd and Jordan, we've been hitting up these tips for harvesting top quality corn silage, and we've delved into preparing harvesting equipment. We've delved into kernel processing, and within that, making sure to do those double checks along the way, even as you get started out in the field. But there's one more area that can be really critical to this whole process as well, and that's chop length. So would you like to take a few minutes and just touch on that part of harvest?
For me, from a nutritionist perspective, we have certain guidelines for our producers on, depending on if you're doing a BMR or non-BMR silage, doesn't make a difference. So if you're doing non-BMR silage, we're going to chop a little finer, probably be more at that 19 millimeters. If you're doing BMR, we're going to be more like 24. Now it is a little bit farm by farm specific, so those are just general guidelines. But I'm going to turn it over to Todd, because from a chopping perspective, I know with these newer ones and the technology that we have, we can also adjust based on moisture. And then I would also like to hear from kind of what the expectation around frequency of sharpening knives within harvest. So a little bit of a loaded question there for you, Todd, but I'm going to let you take it.
Yeah, perfect. It's kind of the nature of the beast. Wetter corn is going to chop shorter than drier corn. So with some of the technologies on the forage harvesters, it'd be like on our units, there's a near infrared sensor reading the moisture, and then we can vary the length of cut depending on the moisture. And we talked earlier that there could be a lot of variance in the fields this year for the way our growing season was and kind of how wet spring was when planting was. So this is a year where that automatic length of cut would definitely come into play, and we can set up parameters to where in the wetter areas we're going to cut it longer, and then as you get into drier areas it would automatically shorten that length of cut. And by doing so, you're really trying to keep your particle sizes consistent throughout that whole field, kind of no matter what the moisture is or what those little variances in moistures. But that way, when you go to If you shake out a sample, whether you're shaking out a spot of the corn that looks a little greener or a spot that looks a little drier, the ultimate goal is to have a consistent shaker box result from doing that, where if we run one length of cut in both dry and wet corn, you're going to get two different shaker box results from shaking out those feed samples. So by doing the auto length of cut, we can have more consistency in our particle length coming through. And then as far as sharpening, we really want to make sure when we start the day off that we're doing a full shear bar reset and adjustment there, and then sharpening the knives. Corn doesn't wear the knives as much as like hay. Like, it's definitely more crucial to sharpen knives more often than hay. In corn silage with these higher horsepower machines, we kind of want to do a good adjustment in the morning, and then from there adjust a shear bar every hour, and then sharpen knives about every 3 hours. So you're kind of doing two shear bar adjustments to a knife sharpening as the day's going on, but then throughout the day still running some passes on the knives to keep that cutting edge nice and sharp for creating that consistency in the particle length.
And that's something with these newer choppers that doesn't necessarily take a lot of time, right, Todd? I mean, if they had a couple minutes where maybe they were waiting for a truck or needed to refill the inoculant tank, I mean, it doesn't require much downtime, correct?
No, it does not. When you're right on with that, it's about 2 minutes, to touch up the knives and set the shear bar. If we're just doing a shear bar adjustment, that can be done in basically under 60 seconds. So it's really fast to do those. And then a quick knife sharpening. I think the biggest thing is for everybody that it's like when harvest starts, it just seems like the energy starts flowing and everybody gets excited, and sometimes there's a rush and a panic happening. But I think the biggest thing is for everyone to remind each other, slow down, take your time, the corn's going to get off, and reassure yourself that you're putting up that right feed quality for what the dairy and their nutritionist is truly looking for out of that feed. But it's a big thing that every farm really needs to have that ringleader put in place, to what you said, that one person that's in charge of making sure that feed quality is superb and coming in consistent throughout the whole harvest. And then hopefully they can be the same person, can be the person to help slow everyone down when needed and help make sure they're making the adjustments that are needed to put up that feed quality.
One of my closing comments around this, don't ever forget how important safety is when working around all this equipment and just being around the harvest process. There's so many moving parts, people that are working long hours, and so just a reminder to everyone that safety is still number one, and we hope that everyone is able to be with their families at night and not have anything bad happen.
Oh, it's a very good reminder.
It sure is. And to wrap up this conversation that we've had today with Jordan and Todd, just to hit a few of those highlights, we've talked about tips for top quality corn silage, like preparing harvesting equipment. We've delved into kernel processing and chop length and a lot of the details around that. But the other thing that both of you have emphasized as well is it's really the team and communication. And it's having that point person that is paying attention to these details and making sure that there's a communication between nutritionists, between the farm, between the people that are on the harvesting side, so that the end product is a bunker full of corn silage that cows are going to be happy with for the season to come. And Jordan, that's what you're after, right? That makes your job a little bit easier, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Selfishly, it does help the process, but all joking aside, it just takes the intentions around pulling the team together, understanding who's in charge of what. I promise you, 1 hour of time getting together with the harvest crew will go a long ways, and hopefully avoiding confusion or issues that will arise during harvest. It's not that we're going to avoid breakdowns or other things that come up. They are going to happen. But when you have a really good plan, people that know what they need to do in times of breakdowns or issues, it's just going to go a lot smoother.
Well, Todd and Jordan, thank you so much for jumping onto this GPS DairyCast. You've shared some valuable information and insights with our listeners today. And for those that might be looking for a little more information, there'll be details in the show notes on how to reach out to the two of you. And also, there's a webinar that the two of you had hosted together earlier this year, and we can include a link in the show notes to that for those that would like to see a little bit more and hear a little bit more from both of you. And so, Todd and Jordan, thank you so much for jumping on the GPS DairyCast. Thank you for jumping in with us on this GPS DairyCast. I'm your GPS DairyCast host, Peggy Coffeen from the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, and thank you for listening.
The GPS DairyCast features conversations that deliver on the GPS Dairy Consulting promise to inspire change and grow leaders. If this GPS DairyCast has you looking for more ways to become an elite dairy producer, find more information in our show notes on how you can add a GPS advisor to your team.